Right, apparently I'm live now, so hopefully the stream is good. We're having a little problems with getting onto the internet this morning, and I'm a little tired. We were up all night. We watched the sunset, or watched the sunrise actually, and I got up just a few minutes ago after only a few hours of sleep. So if I'm a little tired, that's because we were all night looking for lizards, and it was a successful night. We did pretty good. We found a few more species that we were looking for. All right, so today what I want to talk about are terrestrial biomes. Now, I'm going to skip over what determines the distribution of species because I'm going to talk about that in class on Monday. So if you're going to follow along, I'm going to be on the PowerPoint about terrestrial biomes. Now, I can't access the PowerPoint because it was taking like 30 minutes to download that file. So I, yeah, I always download my files off of Canvas to make sure that I'm on the same page as you guys. So anyway, I can't do that. So I'm gonna do this from memory here. But basically, if you remember from yesterday's lecture, we have, ecosystems, and ecosystems are, it's all the living components. It's all the plants and animals and fungus and bacteria, everything that's alive, and how those things interact with the non-living environment. And we call that an ecosystem. Okay, well, there are similar ecosystems distributed across the planet. Think about like a desert. In a desert, you have it as a biome. Even though the species might be different, the desert is interacting or is functioning very similarly, regardless of whether or not you're in North America or in Australia or Africa. So we would call those similarly functioning ecosystems or groups of ecosystems biomes. So, as you can imagine, one of them is a desert biome. And the other ones, we're going to go through each of these. We got desert, we've got tropical rainforest, we have savanna, grasslands, Mediterranean, deciduous forest, and and then we also have alpine tundra, and or just tundra. And these are the major biomes. And what to be clear about this, if you Google biomes and you go to Wikipedia or you go to the textbook or you go to the World Wildlife Fund or you go to different areas, what you'll discover about these different about the list of biomes is almost every ecologist or every group recognizes slightly different biomes. There's no right answer here. For example, a lot of sites might just clump savannas and grasslands into a single biome because they're both grasslands and they have herbivory and fire, but I separate them out for the simple fact that one's temperate, one's tropical, and we'll get to that. Okay, so let's do this. Let's start with these biomes, and let's start. I don't know. We can start at the poles, and one of the first types of biomes is the tundra. These have very low, what is called primary productivity. Now, primary productivity is a measure of how much carbon you're sequestering out of the atmosphere. So it's a function of growth, right? So for growth, you need energy and you need nutrients. So in a tundra, because much of it is frozen, the little bugs, little microbes can't break down all the organic matter, and so there's very little nutrient availability, and you only have a growing season for maybe 2 or 3 months out of the year. The rest of the time, it's all frozen. So as a result, tundra has very low rates of net primary productivity. Now, there's another thing called standing up or the biomass of these ecosystems. Tundras are interesting because you can literally have like 1,000 feet or more of just solid organic matter in a tundra that's just built up over thousands and tens of thousands of years. But generally, when we talk about the biomass of an ecosystem, we're talking about how much of it is alive. So in a tundra, not only do you have very low rates of primary productivity, which means you have low rates of growth, you also don't have a lot of biomass, okay? Because, the plants are like this big. Once again, they're just completely limited in energy and nutrient availability. So that would be a tundra. You find those around the poles, and you also can find them. Those are called alpine tundra. or I'm sorry, Arctic tundra. And then alpine tundra you would find above the tree line. So we have like alpine tundra in New Mexico. And a big difference between alpine and Arctic tundra is we don't have the accumulation of biomass. You're literally walking on rocks out there. But once again, it's similar. Um, there's not a lot of biomass, and it's very limited in energy, especially the fact that the growing season is only just a few months long. Okay, so that's tundra. Yes, I'm drinking a Red Bull first thing in the morning. Well, actually, it's actually 11 o'clock here, so I was able to get some sleep in. As we go southward from the tundra, it will transition into trees, and you get what's called the boreal forest. And these northern boreal forests are dominated by a plant called a conifer, like think fir trees and pine trees, but mostly fir trees. These are actually the largest. Oh, yeah. Let me see. Sorry about the audio. My internet is really fried here. It's not that good. Let me see if I can maybe redo this lecture like in an airport on the way home. I have two 10-hour layovers on the way home. Okay. So these northern boreal forest, these are the largest forest on the planet. I mean, they go all across Russia, Europe, Canada, Alaska, and even down into the U.S. in terms of like being part of the mountain range. So think like the Sandias, that would be similar to a northern boreal forest. Now they have low primary productivity, much but higher than a tundra. Now, the thing here about a northern boreal forest is because it's dominated by trees, it has a very large standing crop because those trees could be hundreds of years old. So they might be growing very slowly, but they can accumulate the biomass over very large amounts of time, right? So despite having low primary productivity, they have a large standing crop. So that would be the northern boreal forest, dominated by a few species of these conifers. Then as you go southward, you'll come into like the eastern United States, and you'll have the deciduous forest. Now, these forests, instead of being dominated by conifer trees, are dominated by a type of tree that's an angiosperm that loses their leaves during the wintertime. And they have a much higher rate of primary productivity. So they're growing faster. They have um, uh, a large standing crop, even more so than the northern boreal forest. And because they have a much longer growing season, they're getting more energy. It's warmer, longer parts of the year, like maybe 6 months out of the year, 7, 8 months sometimes out of the year in the far south. So their primary productivity is much higher. And guess what? If we were to draw a gradient on a biodiversity, like how diverse it is, then you would see that the tundra would have the lowest diversity, then the boreal forest would have, the second lowest, and then these temperate rainforest, or sorry, these deciduous forests, they would have even more diversity. I say I've got one person left. How's the internet here? Has the sound improved at all? Let me know here. No. Oh, cool. Thanks. All right, excellent. Okay, so these temperate forests, like I said, because it's warmer longer, they grow more. And guess what? They have more diversity as well. So that was how we would define it. They have like a medium rate. And in the lecture slides, it actually has a range of the net primary productivity for each of these. A few from the Mississippi River without ever having to hit the ground. That's excellent. Thanks. Okay. Now, as you hit about the 100th parallel, or the 100th meeting, I'm sorry. So in Texas, you'll see these eastern forests will give way to what is called the temperate grasslands. Now, the other type of grassland is are the savannas. They're both dominated by grasses. They actually have a fairly high primary productivity in the summertime or in the growing season. Okay, so these temperate grasslands, they don't have a large standing crop, but they do have very high rates of primary productivity. But the reason why there's not forest is, well, there's several reasons. One of them is the grasslands can be maintained by both fire and grazing, which is a type of disturbance. And disturbance kind of removes biomass. So you can think that a fire will go through and like remove the biomass. Or if you've got historically a bison grazes, that would be removing the biomass as well. So these temperate grasslands, they've got fairly decent rates of diversity, not like the forest, because the forest has got, a lot of habitat complexity, a lot of places for things to live. The main difference, and this is important, the main difference between a grassland and a savanna is that grasslands, they have winter time. And in winter, temperatures drop, water freezes, and basically all primary productivity stops. So, that hard freezing, that cold temperature really separates out savannas from grasslands. And in fact, I'll talk about savannas next. Savannas are grasslands in the tropics, and they also have a growing season and non-growing season. But instead of their growing season being determined by temperature, as it is in North America, freezing temperatures, savannas, their non-growing season is based on drought. Now, that's huge, that temperature variation thing, because many, many, many organisms cannot survive freezing temperatures. So just having a freeze line in your biome really separates it out. So a lot of things, like in a northern grassland, they have to leave, they have to migrate south. But in a savanna, it just gets hot and dry. So savannas being more tropical, not freezing, guess what? They also have these, they have higher rates of diversity. So if you were to go to a savanna, you would find more species there than you would in a temperate grassland. Now, in the U.S., if you were driving across country and you went through all the grasslands through, western Texas and Oklahoma, and going all the way up into Nebraska and those areas, the Midwest, eventually, if you're in the Southwest, you would transition, if you're on I-10, into I-40 and the I-10 going into the Chihuahua Desert as you hit around Las Cruces or so, or maybe even before that. Now, deserts are dry. They only have, like 10 inches of rain a year. And there's variability. Like the Atacama Desert in Chile might only have like an inch of rain a year, even millimeters a year. And it might get 2 years. That is dry. It's one of the driest places on earth. Whereas the Chihuahua Desert might have 12 to 15 inches of rain. And desert areas typically have low rates of primary productivity, and they don't have a whole lot of standing biomass. There's just not enough water in deserts to really support a forest. Now, you can support these large columnar cacti, and you can support, depending on how much rain they get and how cold they get, a very diverse life. Some of the deserts, the Sonora Desert and the Chihuahua Desert, as you get down into Mexico, are quite diverse for a desert, right? They're not as diverse as probably a savanna or something like that. And everything living in these deserts has to be drought and heat adaptive. And of course, a low primary productivity, even though it's a long growing season, they just don't have. They're building something next to me. Gosh, of course. But even though they've got this really long growing season, lots of temperature, lots of energy coming in year long, there's just not the water. That's the limiting resource in a desert. Okay, now let's say we're going further south, or let's stay in the mid latitudes here. Another type of ecosystem that some people will delineate, some will not, is the is a Mediterranean style biome. And the Mediterranean is like California or the area in the Mediterranean. Hot, dry some of the year, cool winter rains. You have actual bushes and scrubs, and it's chaparral, so it's dependent on fire. Okay, so fire will come through these things, kind of wipe everything out, level the playing field, so to speak, and then everything grows back. So these chaparral environments are dependent on fire, and A lot of the animals and plants, especially the plants, are very adapted to this regular fire because, they'll seed right after that, or they'll come back up from the roots and grow again. Okay, as we go southward, we'll pass through the savannas, and then we'll get to the other large biome of the earth, and that is a rainforest. And rainforests have some of the highest rates of primary productivity of any ecosystem in the world. There's some aquatic ones or marine ones that have similar rates, and those are coral reefs. But on land, rainforests have the highest rates of net primary productivity. Remember, that's the amount of carbon you're sequestering per square meter per unit of time, or whatever your unit of area per your unit of time. It could be grams per cubic, or sorry, grams per square centimeter. It could be, oh, cool, there's a hawk. And it's being chased by a bunch of kingbirds. I thought I heard a hawk earlier. It's nice giving a lecture out. You can kind of see in the background the reflection off the windows given the mountains here. But getting back to our biomes here, rainforests, they grow basically all year long, right? Because they have plenty of water, plenty of nutrients, plenty of energy, and very high primary productivity. And they also have amongst the highest rates of diversity of any ecosystem in the world. There's the rivals, of course, are the coral reefs, and I honestly don't know which ones are the more diverse. They're very, very comparable to each other. But the rainforest, they got all the habitat complexity. It doesn't ever freeze. Plenty of rain, plenty of water. So I think at one time these were probably tropical rainforests around here. They've been cut really bad. There's also dry forest around here too, and there's also a lot of pine. So this is a very interesting Caribbean pine tropical forest. It's very interesting. Doesn't really fit into one of the biomes, which is kind of cool. So even though like I'm talking about biomes, I'm realizing where I'm at doesn't fit neatly into one of those biomes. But the majority of ecosystems really, really do. And interestingly, like Albuquerque, where a lot of you live, we're kind of in between biomes. As you drive south on I-25, south out of Albuquerque, you enter into the northern reaches of the Chihuahuan Desert. As you go northward, you reach into like the top of some of the grassland habitats and things that aren't really delineated into one of the big biomes. So we live in a transition between biomes right where we live, which is kind of cool. Going the other side of the Sandia is traveling east on I-40, and you clearly are entering into the short grasslands. And of course, as you go north and eastward, you would stay in grasslands for a very long time. Okay, so that's an introduction to our biomes. The important thing to know about them is just remember which ones are which, and then know which of the biomes are which, and know something about their primary productivity and how that relates to their growth, their diversity, and where you might find them. So a test question I like to ask often is, I'll ask, which biome has a large standing crop with maybe low net primary productivity. And the idea of, the answer to that would be, the northern boreal forest. They're cold 6 months out of the year or more, right? I mean, they might only grow for 3 or 4 months, but the trees grow over, centuries, adding on all this accumulated biomass. So low net primary productivity, they're not growing very fast, but they can accumulate it over time. That's an example of a question I often ask about the biomes. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. That kind of gives us an introduction the last 2 days to the biomes and what is ecology. And then next week, what I'm going to do is talk about the distribution of organisms. So we're going to talk about niches, fundamental and realized niche. I would go ahead and learn that a little bit. In fact, I might try to get a video out to kind of help you guys understand fundamental versus realized niche. And it's pronounced niche, not niche. Niche is actually incorrect. I know I'm being persnickety here. Niche is French for nest, and niche comes from the English word of like a little place you stick something. That would be a niche, and a niche is a unique place for a species to survive. All right, so I will see you guys on Monday. I will be leaving tomorrow at 11, and I'll got one of the crappiest flights you can imagine coming back. I get 2 10-hour layovers, so. Yeah, but I'll be recovered. I'll be ready to go on Monday. We'll talk about the distribution of organisms, and then we're going to jump into the different types of biomes. the biomes. We'll jump into the different levels of ecology, probably starting with some ecophysiology and population ecology. All right. And then whatever we get to on Wednesday, that will be test 3. So like I said, I don't try to play catch up or anything. Okay, y'all have a great weekend, and man, we'll see you soon. Any questions before I leave? All right. Well, y'all have a good one.